Welcome guys to another chess analysis, and today we'll be checking out just brilliant game played by 12 years old Magnus Carlsen. Now, without giving too many spoilers, this was a game filled with kinda boring positional moves, until Magnus decided to farm a couple brilliant ones and suddenly the game was over. So there's really just a crazy ending to it, so buckle up and let's just get into this. With the white pieces is our protagonist, 12 years old Magnus Carlsen, already rated 2385. Like, this just sounds absolutely ridiculous. He probably had a title already, like FM or something, but I just couldn't find it, so I just didn't put it in. Anyways, Magnus didn't really have it easy, because with the black pieces, he's Hans Harstad, a 2249 rated FIDE master. And yeah, against him, Magnus decided to go with e4. We have e5 by black, and after knight f3, knight c6, and bishop to b5, Magnus goes for one of the most famous openings in chess. You have the Ruy Lopez or the Spanish game, however you want to call it. And whether you play this opening or not, these players employ just very common and very useful ideas throughout the game. So hope you guys can learn something from this game. The game continued with a6. Black harasses his strong white square bishop. You have bishop to a4. And after knight f6, hitting the z4 pawn, Magnus just castles, which is actually a very common idea here, because if black is to take this pawn, well, there are a lot of ideas white can use, like rook e1 or d4, that usually end up with white either regaining a pawn or even standing better if black messes up. So instead, in this position, we simply have b5, black continues going after this bishop, we have bishop to e3, and now after bishop to e7, black is indeed threatening to capture this pawn because there is no longer pins on this file, so Magnus just calmly plays rook e1 and defends it. Now black continues with d6, he opens this one squared bishop, and now Magnus goes for probably the most common pawn in the Ruy Lopez. He goes for this c3, preparing this d4 thrust to try and conquer the entire center. Black just castles, and now Magnus really enjoyed playing d4. However, if Magnus is to play d4, black just plays bishop d4, and oh no, that's a very annoying pin, because this knight is really supporting this, center control, and without it, Magnus would probably have to close the position, and in doing so, closing this bishop, so not ideal. So instead, it just prepares this idea and goes h3, logical. However, black obviously isn't just gonna stand around, and is actually gonna employ his own plans. He goes knight to a5, which again is a very common idea for black in the Ruy Lopez. He not only hits this very strong white squared bishop, white basically never wants to give this bishop away for a knight, and he also opens the path for this c pawn to push and to expand on the queen side. Magnus obviously preserves this bishop. We have bishop to c2, and black indeed goes for c5. Now Magnus continues with his plan. He goes d4, and black doesn't really gain anything by trading in the center. In fact, it only favors white, since he would control the entire center. And so he just plays queen to c7, protecting the e5 pawn, since Magnus was threatening to capture it, and also develops a queen and will further help in connecting the rooks later on. So Magnus just continues developing. We have knight b to d2, and now that the knight has done his job on a5, it just returns to c6. We have knight to c6, which puts even more pressure on d4 and basically forces Magnus to make a decision. He closes the center, goes d5, and actually it forces the knight to a kind of weird square. He can choose between these three, and he decides to go to d8. However, it might seem kind of weird, but this position has been reached, in fact, like hundreds if not thousands of times by masters, and it's just textbook Ruy Lopez opening still, because this knight will eventually find himself to an active square, like on f7 if this pawn is to move or something later on. And yeah, in this position Magnus goes for a4, just trying to chip away at this strong queenside pawn formation. And now the most common move for black in this position is to play rook b8, just solidifying everything, because obviously Magnus is threatening to win this pawn, because this pawn is pinned. So rook b8 is just a great, very natural move. However, in this position, black goes rook to a7, which is probably an attempt to muddy the waters because Black probably doesn't want to lose against a 12-year-old kid, especially since he's a professional. It probably wouldn't be a great feeling. But yeah, this isn't really a bad move because now the rook is protected, so Magnus really wouldn't gain anything by taking this pawn on b5. So he just continues with his normal plan and goes knight to f1. Now, this is actually another very common plan in the Ruy Lopez. Bring this knight from b1 to d2 to f1 and possibly to d3 because, well, along with this knight, they can both act as amazing defenders or amazing attackers as you please. Because this knight on f3 can further go to h4 and maybe to f5 and put pressure on black camp. However, against this, Black prophylactically plays the immediate g6, never allowing any of this business. However, in doing so, he opens this dark square and Magnus just jumps right in without hesitation. We have bishop to h6. After the rook slides across, well, it isn't that big of a problem because eventually you can always protect your dark squares with your dark square bishop. So, not the end of the world. Anyways, Magnus continues with this plan. We have knight to g3. And here Black plays knight to d7, which basically aims to rotate this knight and again push this f-pawn that will later be used for the knight to occupy this square and act just as a fantastic defender because it will kick away this bishop and prevent knight infiltrations as well. So a very good piece on f7. To this, Magnus just rotates his own knight. We have knight to h2, possibly aiming to go to g4 and to h6 someday. And Black simply goes f6, continuing with his plan. Like I said, he wants to go knight f7, and Magnus of course sees this and immediately plays bishop e3, since the bishop was gonna get kicked out eventually. Now Black plays knight b6, which puts pressure on the a4 pawn and motivates Magnus to make a trade. We have a takes on b5, a takes on b5, and bishop to d3, putting pressure on the b5 pawn. Now Black finally activates sort of this white squared bishop and puts it doing something. We have bishop to d7, protecting the b5 pawn. And now Magnus just plays queen to d2, developing the queens, connecting the rooks, and I mean so far it's kind of a boring game because it has been very positional. However, there's really nothing you can do. I mean, these positions can arise from the Ruy Lopez. So yeah, against this, Black plays knight f7, just improves this knight and controls these dark squares around his king. And Magnus just got bored of waiting and started trying to create something. We have rook takes on a7, queen takes on a7, and queen to e2, putting pressure on this b5 pawn. Black simply protects it. We have queen to a6. And now Magnus just goes knight to g4, you know, desperately trying to create something on the queen side because he's dying of boredom, right? Today's Black replies with the king to g7, just emphasizing his control over the h6 square, and Magnus plays bishop to c1, which is actually a very ingenious move since he basically wants to create a battery along this file with the queen and bishop, and perhaps to try and infiltrate somehow. Now Black simply plays a knight to a4, you know, keeping these pawns in check. Now this pawn can never move, or the c3 one falls, and things wouldn't be great here. And also perhaps he might look to occupy some more active squares in the future, because this c pawn can push, and yeah, the c5 square would be vacated. And to this, Magnus goes for bishop to c2, since he's on this plan. We have rook to a8, queen to e3. Magnus sets up this battery along this diagonal. Indeed, we have c4 like I was talking about. And after rook f1, knight c5, Magnus has finally set up his pieces to attack the black king, and even though the game is equal, it might get a little complicated now because Magnus plays knight to h6, and this is sort of a bluff because the game is still completely equal. For example, if you just take the knight and queen takes, king goes to g8, and there's absolutely nothing here. Like, white can never crash through. Maybe f4 or something, but it's not really that hard to defend. However, Black started maybe to get a little bit greedy because he played knight to g5, and this looks like a decent move because you're actually threatening to capture the white knight and developing your knight to a really nice active square. So what's the worst that can happen, right? Well, the worst that can happen is f4 because again, black is still not in trouble, but he has to be very careful. For example, this knight is being attacked, and if you do something like knight to f7, all of a sudden there's knight to h5. Now things can really take a turn for the worse. For example, if you take this knight, well, it's just game over because after f takes e5, this escape square is scattered out, so can never run away. If you take this knight, well, there's just simple bishop to d1 and you're basically dead. And you'd have to go something like e5, but then e takes on f6, and I mean your king isn't really having a lot of fun on the h6 square. So instead, black plays pretty much the only move here, which is to take this pawn and to nullify white's threats. You have queen takes on f4, and now again black is walking in very nice. The best move would be to go for something like king takes knight. However, after h4, you know, this knight is obviously pinned, your Magnus is going to retake the piece. However, this king is going to stand wide open, so it's very easy to discard something like this. Instead, black just didn't see white's threats and decided to be greedy, and he went for bishop takes on h3. And this is like just such a pawn grabber move because Magnus can't retake, otherwise he's just getting forked, right? And it would be not the best ending. However, he has this queen to h4, which defends this knight, you know, puts pressure on pretty much every black piece defending his king. So black just takes it back. We have bishop to d7. However, now there's actually a brilliant combination that's available to Magnus, and he really plays it to perfection. You know, that's like 3 or 4 moves that you need to find, but it's just such an aesthetic combination, and it only works due to a very forced combination that actually happened in the game. So if you don't remember the moves from the thumbnail, please pause the video and try to really grasp this combination to its fullest. And yeah, it's really nice. And so the move in this position is queen takes. No, it isn't. Wait for the queen side. It's not yet. It's actually e5. Like, it's such a clever move because, for example, if like let's say white just passes the move, well, he takes f6, bishop takes, and now white can do pretty much whatever he wants. I mean, this knight is hanging, and you're just getting murdered here. So obviously black has to react, and probably the most clever way to react is d takes on e5, because if you take with this pawn, well, this knight is falling and so is your king. So you might as well take with this pawn and keep this file closed and you're not protected, right? However, to this, there's another brilliant move. Knight to h5 check again, that knight from the other variation. This is like incredible because no matter what black does, he's just dead. For example, he can't go to the f file first, this square is taken, but if he goes to f8, well, this knight just falls because it's pinned, and your king isn't gonna have a lot of fun here either. So the king would have to go to h8. After bishop takes g5, f takes on g5, we have another great move, queen to g3, just putting pressure on the e5 pawn. And if this pawn is to fall, well, it's pretty much just mate. So black would have to protect it with something like bishop to d6, but then this pawn falls. If he tries to defend it with his queen, well, knight f7. I mean, basically, white has a response to just every black move. It's just incredible. So instead, we cannot move the king, so we have to take one of the knights. And if the knight on h6 is taken, well, this is easy. You just exploit this discovered check. We have knight to f6, and after something like king to g7, well, this knight is falling. Now you're threatening queen to h6, so black has to play something like h5. But now you can even just sacrifice the knight, and after queen takes on h5, there's just a lot. Too many threats black can't really parry, so yeah, this is also not very good for him. And so the only option we haven't really looked at is pawn takes knight. And now it seems like white's coordination is just all messed up and white does nothing. However, there's actually only one move in this position that wins for white. So again, feel free to pause the video and try to find a brilliant, just brilliant way to finish this game in style. And yeah, no pressure, because a little 12-year-old kid found it at the time. So yeah. And the move is actually queen takes on g5. Like, the 12-year-old kid just found a way into history books at this point, because I mean, after pawn takes, you just have rook to f7, and even if this knight is taken, I mean, wherever the king goes, you just go to h7, and it's just a perfect mate. Black king completely stuck. His major pieces are stuck here on the queen side, just completely helpless. And yeah, in just a matter of like 5 moves, I mean, the game was somewhat equal back here. However, like I said, Magnus just trying to create some practical chances and stack these pieces towards the king side, while Black was focused on the queen side with all his pieces. And yeah, he basically was able to squeeze water out of stone like he does nowadays in a lot of equalish endgames. So yeah, that was basically it. Wait, let me pull up the final position. Let's just enjoy this fantastic mate one more time. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed, and catch you in the next one.